做梦乱！ Det är väldigt många i bakgrunden.
in it.
That man's an imposter. That man is the imposter.
Hi, I'm back. Sorry I was gone for a while. I had something taking up all my time, you could say. But now that I'm back, I wanted to talk about Diaboromon here. Diaboromon, back when we all saw the movie that we could remember, was very much a fun villain for me. I mean, he was very much just going all in on, I just want to destroy the world. Nothing else. That was just pure yes, a villain to stop good. And I feel like this deck perfectly encapsulates what it's like to be, for your opponent, Matt and Ty, before Omnimon shows up. For the first time ever. Very overwhelmed, overpowered by an annoying force that keeps just spawning everything on the board. And then there are instances where the deck feels like you're going up against Omnimon once he shows up. Mainly red decks that run a certain card that... The only downside about this deck is there's not many variety in terms of, like, different names you can play, because the whole entire point of the deck is that you play a spawning copying machine. So, with that out of the way, let's get on to the deck profile. On to the eggs. First off, for Sumimon from BT22. We want to run this one over the EX6 version, mainly because while memory gain is powerful, the fact that it's only on deletion is a little bit of a problem. And the draw one is more important here because having more cards in hand generally means you're going to be able to probably win the game. On to our Caramons. We're running X Antibody from BT24, Caramon from BT22, Caramon from BT5. We want to run these four because, well, a few things. The searchers are better. in my opinion, than the BT2 version of Caramon, because that version of BT2 Caramon requires for the Digimon to have the same name as this Digimon, meaning the tokens that you play out have to be Diaboromon. Whereas these guys, their effects are really good, they're immediate for you to search and get cards into your hand, and as I said earlier, the quicker you can get cards into your hand, the more likely you are to win the game. And the BT22 Caramon's protection effect is really good. Having multiple protection effects on a singular stack can really help out your game plan. And Caramon X is here for the obvious reason. He's an X antibody. He plays out a token on Digivolve or on move, which is, if you know already for this deck, basically your win condition, get out a bunch of tokens and get advantage. On to our Karasarimons. We're running 4 from BT22 and 4 from EX6. Now then, why these two in particular and not the BT5 and BT2 counterparts? Well, because the BT5 only plays out one errata, because he only works if you don't have an errata. And the BT2 counterpart and the BT5 counterpart have the same problem, where they only gain an ability if you play out something with the same name of them as an inherited effect, which will only work if you play out Diaboromon, which, you know, is kind of the thing of this deck, but I argue that for later in the game, you tend to want to more control tempo than be aggressive with Diaboromon, as having more tokens out in the field means you're less likely to lose the game because of all of your protection effects that will proc when you trigger with tokens, rather than being able to be as aggressive as possible. From my experience with Diaboromon, when I'm as aggressive as possible, I'm usually not in a good position. But that's just my experience with the deck, and there can be arguments for both of these, because the Karasarimon from BT2 is not once per turn, and the Karasarimon from BT5 gives all your tokens rush. So while those two can be very aggressive and very memory gaining, I feel like they're not as good as gaining advantage when you have them at level 4, because the BT6 one will pop a 3-cost or lower, and the BT22 will play out at least 2 erratas if you don't have an errata out starting, and if you have one errata out, you can get out another. On to our Inframons. We're running 3 of EX6, 3 of BT17, and 2 of BT22. Why these ratios? Well, for a few reasons. One, I tend to base deck profiles of cards that I've had or had, and I only have or had 3 copies of EX6. If you have more of EX6, I would suggest bumping up both EX6 and 17 to 4. But there are arguments for the BT22 one, as it makes sure that your DP can't get reduced, which can be important, as you know, you kind of want your body to stick around, and DP reduction is one of the ways to get around many protections, as it will just still automatically delete even if you try to protect. But also, the Inframons from EX6 and BT17 are much better than the 22, as they have an all turns when a Diaboromon is played in name. You can Digivolve one of your opponent's Digimon, and believe me, as you saw in the video, that was really important to break an opponent's combo. Whereas the Inframon from BT22 says when any of your guys with unidentified would be deleted, you may delete a Diaboromon token. Which, don't get me wrong, it's an all-turns protection for any of your unidentified traits, but I would say that the EX6 and 17 are outclassing it, especially EX6, because when you delete Diaboromon in name, you may Digivolve this into a Diaboromon. So with a Caramon X, you can go Karasarimon, Inframon into Diaboromon, all for a total cost of 5 memory, or 4 memory if you use a scramble. On to the big bad himself, Diaboromon and Diaboromon X Antibody. We're running 3 Diaboromon X Antibody from BT24, and 2 each of BT22 and EX6 Diaboromon. Now, you might be wondering why these ratios and copies. A few reasons. The ratios for Diaboromon X Antibody is because he's our win condition. He has the overclock trait, which means just as long as it's end of turn, you can just attack your opponent by deleting either a token or another unidentified trait. And 2, he has a really good kind of protection effect. It's more of a, hey, when any of your guys with Diaboromon leave the field, play out a Diaboromon from hand or Digivolution card. and that's really useful. Not to mention his when digivolving is super strong. One of your opponents gets D-Digivolve 1 for each of your own Digimon, which in your case would usually be a lot of Digimon. So you can get them all the way down to a rookie, then delete their highest play cost after that. Then there's BT22's Diaboromon, which his when attacking when digivolving are very useful, because it just swarms the board with more tokens, because it's not once per turn. And also, whenever you play out something with unidentified, you can delete one of your opponent's Digimon with the lowest play cost. Then EX6. This is probably the best Diaboromon that you want to run, period, in any Diaboromon deck, as he not only gives all of your Diaboromons blocker and jamming, but he also has the ability to, when your opponent plays out a Digimon, activate the when digivolving start a main effect, so that you play out a token, which, hey, guess what Impramon does whenever you play out a token if he's beneath a Diaboromon? Now then, there are some arguments for the Diaboromon Ace, but I find that Diaboromon Ace really isn't that good for this deck, and, well, he's just at best. On to our Armageddonmons. I run 2 of the BT5 Armageddonmon, as being able to stop your opponent's level 7 when digivolving effects is super strong, and it's honestly a very fun floodgate, because it stops deck like Omnimon in particular. When he just digivolves, or DNA digivolves, you stop those effects because he's level 7. And it's just a good lockdown. Then there is the BT17 Armageddonmon that you could run. While he deletes up to a total play cost 15 worth of your opponent's Digimon, and he can also attack your opponents unsuspended, I believe that the BT5 has an easier condition to be brought out, as you just need to delete a Diaboromon to reduce the play cost, rather than returning up to 13 different cards with unidentified or Diaboromon in their text from trash to bottom of deck to reduce the play cost by 1. On to our erratas. We're running 4 of BT5 and 2 of BT22. BT22 is really useful for the memory setting and the redirection, but BT5 is the most useful errata, as whenever you digivolve into a Diaboromon, you may suspend this tamer to play out a Diaboromon token, and oh boy, in combination with all the tokens that you play out from Diaboromon, this just ramps it up to 11. Not only that, but his start a turn effect is better because it gains you memory, not just setting you to 3. So if your opponent sets you to like 3 or 4, you go up a memory if you have it identified in trash. For our options of the deck, we're going to be running 3 defense training, 2 black scramble, and 2 comet hammer. I don't think I need to explain that much with defense training and black scramble being good generic cards, because, you know, you run them in every black deck. And Comet Hammer is really good in black decks, as, you know, digivolving 4 for 5 may seem like a lot, but, like, it's really, really good, especially with this Diaboromon. And hey, guess what Diaboromon we're running? BT22, which is a CS, so when he attacks, we can actually activate the delay effect, thus digivolving our opponent's Digimon even further before we play out a token and then deleting something on the board. Some pros for this deck. 1, its swarming capabilities are immense, especially when you get out a lot of erratas from BT5. You can just swarm the board with tokens and just cause problems for your opponent by overwhelming them with sheer numbers. 2, it's usually really consistent, especially with the BT5 Caramon that just allows you to get deeper into your deck and get pieces. 3, the combo lines are simple and easy to follow. Like, it's not hard to, like, know different routes for this deck. The combo lines are just simple, easy, and you can just follow them regardless of your skill level. Some cons to this deck. 1, it's very weak to floodgate effects, especially Crimson Blaze. When you can't play out stuff by effects, you're screwed. 2, it's weak to D-Digivolve. Because it doesn't have protection from effects like D-Digivolve, it's just a problem, as your lower bodies typically don't have protection. And 3, there's not much deck space. I only found room for 2 tech cards, which is the Comet Hammer for this deck, But other than that, like, you're usually thin on, like, what cards you can include. So there's not much room for you to find something that can help you counter certain matchups. Like, I have not been able to find a way to play around Crimson Blaze with this deck. That is my problem. That might just be my skill as a player. But, in my opinion, there's not much room for this deck to find a way to play through that. But those are just my thoughts on the deck, and the profile itself. So please, do me a favor, a few actually. 1, like and subscribe, just do the good stuff for this channel. 2, comment down below on what deck you'd like to see, because there are a lot of decks that I'm interested in, but maybe you might find a deck that might pique my interest. I'll probably do a community poll someday to say, hey, what deck profile would you guys like to see? And just stay tuned for more. Toodles!